In September 1968, the USS New Jersey reached the firing line. Its mission was crystal clear: to be the world's most powerful floating fire support fortress. The source of this power lay in the ship's main armament, 9 406mm Mark VII guns. Each turret weighed more than a modern destroyer and was protected by approximately 50 centimeters of armor. These massive guns could fire armor-piercing shells weighing nearly 1,200 kilograms. Simply put, the USS New Jersey could take an object weighing almost as much as a Volkswagen Beetle and launch it approximately 40 kilometers away. When the shells reached their highest point, they rose to 3 times the height of Mount Everest and dove toward their target at supersonic speeds. The resulting destruction was almost apocalyptic. A single high-explosive shell could create a crater 15 meters deep and completely clear an area the size of a football field. Dense forest areas were transformed into helicopter landing zones in seconds. However, the power of the New Jersey could not be conveyed solely through numbers. It had to be experienced to truly be understood. During nighttime firing, the muzzle flash instantly turned darkness into daylight. The shock wave traveled across the ocean, powerful enough to feel like it would suck the air out of the lungs of anyone standing nearby. But for the soldiers on the ground, the most jarring thing was the sound of the shells. Because bullets travel faster than sound, the explosion came first, followed by the sound. This was an experience the human brain was not accustomed to. The roar that tore through the air was, according to the soldiers' descriptions, like a freight train passing by or a giant truck tearing through the sky. The displacement of sound and destruction created a psychological shock in itself. The Vietnam War took place during a period of rapid development in modern warfare technology. But in this war, sometimes the most unexpected tools had the greatest impact. In 1968, in an era dominated by supersonic jets and guided missiles, an armored warship left over from World War II was called back into service. The story of the USS New Jersey in Vietnam is a striking example of how not only raw power, but also timely decisions and patience can make a difference on the battlefield. By 1968, American troops serving in Vietnam were under serious pressure. In particular, the fact that soldiers were frequently ambushed in ground combat and could not always reach air support showed how grueling the war had become. Under these conditions, troops on the front lines needed reliable and uninterrupted fire support to survive. Near Vietnam's demilitarized zone, a Marine Corps team was ambushed. They were outnumbered, surrounded by the enemy, and backed up against the sea. They requested air support, but there was no response. They called for artillery support, but only silence came over the radio. Just as despair began to set in, a calm and confident voice came over the radio. When the soldiers looked toward the horizon, they saw nothing but an empty line of sea. Yet about 40 kilometers away, a massive force that had been waiting for a long time had begun to move. One of the steel giants of World War II, the USS New Jersey, had awakened to respond to this call. By the late 1960s, the concept of warfare had changed completely. Supersonic jets, guided missiles, and helicopter units now dominated the battlefield. Therefore, calling a World War II-era battleship back into service seemed like an absurd idea to many in the Navy. The USS New Jersey was considered too large, outdated, and incredibly expensive to operate. It was thought that such a ship could not survive in a modern war. However, the realities of Vietnam were beginning to challenge these assumptions. The bombing of North Vietnam was encountering an intense and highly advanced air defense system.
Planes were being shot down, and pilot losses were mounting. The real problem for Defense Secretary Robert McNamara at the Pentagon was finding firepower that could operate in all weather conditions and provide immediate support to troops on the front lines without risking pilots' lives. At this point, the solution was not to advance in technology, but to go back. There was a huge ship that had been quietly waiting in the Navy's reserve fleet for years. The USS New Jersey was a living relic of World War II. It carried nearly half a meter of steel armor and 9 massive 406-millimeter guns. These weapons represented a raw and overwhelming power no longer seen on modern warships. McNamara believed this brute force could still be effective in the conditions of Vietnam. After a rapid but comprehensive modernization process, the USS New Jersey was recommissioned in April 1968. This decision made the ship the only active battleship in the world. It presented a strange but impressive picture. The gladiator of World War II was heading into a modern guerrilla war.
This assignment was also a huge risk. The USS New Jersey's mission in Vietnam was considered one of the most expensive and controversial experiments in naval history. Some thought the ship would be useless, while others believed it would change the balance of power on the battlefield. The answer would soon be revealed off the coast of the South China Sea. In September 1968, the USS New Jersey reached the firing line and the mission officially began. This mission was to turn the ship into the world's most powerful floating fire support platform. The New Jersey's real power came from 9 406-millimeter Mark VII guns located in 3 large turrets at the front and rear of the ship. Each turret was heavier than a modern warship and protected by approximately 50 centimeters of steel armor. These guns could fire armor-piercing and high-explosive shells weighing nearly 1,200 kilograms. To put it simply, the USS New Jersey could pick up an object weighing almost as much as a car and hurl it nearly 40 kilometers away. When the shells reached their highest point, they rose to 3 times the height of Mount Everest's summit, and then dove toward their target at supersonic speeds. The resulting destruction was too immense to be described in numbers. A single high-explosive shell could create a crater meters deep and completely neutralize a wide area. Dense forested areas were transformed into open spaces where helicopters could land within seconds. However, the New Jersey's firepower was not limited to the physical destruction it caused. During nighttime firing, the muzzle flash instantly turned darkness into daylight. The resulting shock wave traveled for miles over the sea, creating a deep pressure sensation in the chests of those near the ship. For the soldiers on the ground, the most jarring aspect was the sound of the shells. Because the shells traveled faster than sound, the explosion was heard after the shell itself. This created an effect unfamiliar to the human mind. Soldiers likened this sound to a freight train passing by or a giant truck tearing through the sky. The displacement of sound and destruction created a powerful psychological effect that deepened the fear. The raw power possessed by the USS New Jersey only found its true meaning when combined with accuracy. So how could this giant ship hit targets so precisely from dozens of kilometers away? The answer lay in a section deep within the ship known as the Main Battery Control Center. This was essentially the brain of the USS New Jersey, operating entirely through a mechanical system.
At the heart of this center was an analog calculator called the Mark 8. This mechanical computer, weighing tons, consisted of thousands of gears and differentials. It continuously performed complex ballistic calculations, taking dozens of variables into account simultaneously. The ship's own speed and direction, wind strength, air density, and powder temperature were all included in these calculations. As the range increased, even the curvature of the Earth and the Coriolis effect caused by the planet's rotation had to be taken into account. Without these corrections, the shells could miss the target by hundreds of meters. Human eyes on the ground were vital for this system to work correctly. Forward observers identified the target and relayed the coordinates to the ship by radio. One day, an order to fire was received for a target more than 30 kilometers away. The target was a single structure on top of a hill. The first shot was fired for calibration purposes, and the results were evaluated by the forward observer. The spotter relayed this information over the radio. The enemy has just entered the building. Add 50 meters to the right and 100 meters forward. The technicians at the main battery center quickly entered this data into the system. The massive turret was readjusted at an angle so small it was almost imperceptible, and the second shot was fired. About 90 seconds later, the forward observer came back on the radio, his voice tinged with astonishment. "I don't know if the target was hit, but the hill is gone," he said. This moment clearly demonstrated the true power of the USS New Jersey. The ship could shape not only targets beyond the horizon, but the terrain itself. It was a deadly combination of flawless mechanical engineering and human skill. The USS New Jersey quickly became a symbol with two different meanings for the soldiers in Vietnam. For American troops fighting on the front lines, this ship was a savior that appeared in the most difficult moments. When a unit was ambushed, outnumbered, and facing the threat of annihilation, that phrase over the radio changed everything. "This is New Jersey." For those soldiers, those words meant hope for survival. A few minutes after the soldiers relayed their coordinates, that terrifying sound piercing the air could be heard first. Then the ground shook, and explosions turned the surroundings into hell. The enemy fire ceased instantly, and the battle ended abruptly. For the soldiers on the front lines, the USS New Jersey was like help from above. Many remembered these moments as an answer to their prayers. However, the USS New Jersey had another side. This ship, a guardian angel for American soldiers, was a symbol of inevitable destruction for those fighting on the other side. North Vietnamese soldiers had nicknamed it the Black Dragon. The screech of bullets and the intensity of the explosions gradually turned into deep psychological trauma. The mere presence of the New Jersey seriously undermined enemy morale. This psychological effect was deliberately exploited. After some bombardments, leaflets were dropped over the area. These leaflets stated that they had been struck by the world's most powerful battleship, and that another strike would follow within 10 minutes if they did not surrender. Many enemy soldiers chose to lay down their arms after this threat. The prospect of total annihilation had broken their will to fight.
The USS New Jersey's mission in Vietnam was short but extremely intense. Between September 1968 and April 1969, the ship provided almost non-stop fire support. During this period, it fired 5,688 406 mm shells and approximately 15,127 mm rounds. This number exceeded the total ammunition fired by the ship during World War II and the Korean War combined.
The resulting firepower was unprecedented in naval history. However, this power came at a heavy price. The USS New Jersey's operating costs were extremely high, and each mission represented a significant economic burden. When the Nixon administration began cutting defense spending and changing its war strategy, the fate of this giant ship slowly became clear. In December 1969, the USS New Jersey was decommissioned for the second time. The thunder that echoed over the South China Sea was truly silenced this time. The legacy of the USS New Jersey in Vietnam is complex. Strategically speaking, the ship's presence did not alter the ultimate outcome of the war. Geography and the nature of warfare limited the impact of such a weapon. However, its impact at the tactical level, and especially from a humanitarian perspective, was undeniable. It saved countless soldiers' lives and gave frontline troops a chance to survive in desperate moments. The USS New Jersey would later see action again in the 1980s, but the Vietnam period remained the most intense and contradictory chapter of its career. This period represented the last great challenge of the age of guns against the age of missiles. It proved that even in a world dominated by high technology, raw, overwhelming, and yet precise firepower could still be indispensable. The USS New Jersey arrived in Vietnam as an old, outdated relic and departed as a legend. That was the essence of it. If I may add my own commentary, what struck me most about this story was not the sheer scale of the destruction wrought. What was truly striking was how a tool everyone had deemed obsolete could make such a vital difference when used at the right time and in the right way. The USS New Jersey's mission in Vietnam made me think, in war, it's not always the latest technology that matters, but patience, the right decision, and the power deployed at the moment of need. Sometimes what changes the course of war isn't speed or numbers, but that one right moment.